Welcome back to Taiwan versus the world. Today we will talk about disinformation and speak with two people who have worked on the issue. In particular, how China tries to influence Taiwanese audiences through apps and topics such as climate change. Then we will discuss the consequences of the war in Iran for East Asian countries. And now, let's start with our interview. So we hear a lot about information warfare in Taiwan and about malicious influence from foreign actors, predominantly China. And we're talking here today with two people who looked into it. And I would ask you first to introduce yourself if you can.
Hello, everyone. My name is Elena, and I am the co-founder and project lead of our Taiwan work from Research and Action. We are a shared movement infrastructure for climate action, and we have been working with partners in Asia, Africa, and South America. And so we started our first project in Taiwan actually in July 2024.
I as researcher Ming-tse. I work with Elena on climate misinformation and opposition narratives in Taiwan with the focus on energy policy.
And so you have authored a report called Manufacturing Distrust, the Political Production of Energy Transition Narratives on TikTok and Xiaohongshu. This is quite a specific topic. Can you tell us a bit more what the report is about broadly?
So I think before I briefly talk about what this report is about, I think it's important to actually do a bit more introduction of our organization because it tied closely to why we have this idea of doing this report. So as I briefly mentioned, and also Ming-tse just mentioned that Research and Action is an organization focusing on countering climate and energy disinformation. So we do campaign support, especially on strategic communication advice. So understanding the ecosystem of information, for example, how mis and disinformation of climate and energy are being communicated, what strategies that actors in the ecosystem are using, what are the patterns, they all play a critical part to our work. So there are a few things that we have been seeing that are increasing in the past few years. I think one of them is the issue salience of the term resilience, that we have been seeing how the Taiwanese government has putting a lot of emphasis on climate or energy resilience. And they also started to pay a lot of attention on the information resilience. I think this is because we have already been in a situation where we understand and realize that completely eradicating or resolving all the problems we're having now is almost impossible. So learning how to interact with these problems or maybe live with it becomes a strategy that I think the current government is adopting, and I also think the public should do as well. So coming back to the idea of this report, the reason why we did it is because we have been doing online monitoring research on major social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter a lot, but it's mostly because of the accessibility of data from these platforms. But in the last few years, we are seeing a rapid surge of TikTok and Xiaohongshu users in Taiwan. So we thought that since most attention has been concentrated on the more established platforms, it would be valuable to shift our focus to these emerging platforms that have received comparatively little research, particularly in relation to energy and climate issues. So from this report, our findings indicate that discussions of green energy have increasingly become a politicized arena in which environmental issues are reframed and instrumentalized to advance broader political narratives and shape public opinion. But for more information, please read our report.
I think generally we try to collect data on these two platforms, TikTok and Xiaohongshu, to see what kind of climate, most specifically energy policy related misinformation and disinformation has spread, promoted on these two platforms. And we found that actually most of the contents are from Taiwanese media outlets that are more closely tied to Kuomintang and their political figures. As for the comments under this post, we found that all the commenters are all the comments are highly politicized, and they try to attack the ruling party, accusing the government of corruption and hollowing out Taiwan, endangering the public health. So these kind of narratives are becoming more and more dominant on TikTok, especially. As for Xiaohongshu, we found that actually some accounts try to employ cultural messaging to cultivate favorable perceptions of China, and they try to use pro-China content and link online narratives with offline exchange activities that might be part of the CCP's gray zone strategies.
So it's interesting to see that the CCP would be using energy or even climate topics as a form of information warfare. So why do you think it is the case? Why is China using this?
You mean using energy specific issues for
Yes,
FEMI?
yes.
Yeah, so I think it will be important to backtrack a bit to talk about I guess like provide a really high level definition of what is FEMI. So according to the European External Action Service, EEAS, that foreign information manipulation and interference, which is what we call FEMI here, that includes disinformation and primarily emphasizes influence operations conducted by foreign actors. So FEMI is a mostly non-illegal pattern of behavior that threatens or has the potential to negatively impact values, procedures, and political processes. So such activity is manipulative in character, conducted in an intentional and coordinated manner. Um, Actors of such activity can be state or non-state actors, including their proxies inside and outside of their own territory. So this is the definition provided by EAS. So come back to the question that with the definition of FEMI, it is pretty clear that it's objective, like whoever the malicious actors are, their objective is to impact values, procedures, and political processes. So whatever issues, topics, problems that these actors could game on, they would just take advantage of it. As such, the prevalence of climate crisis and also one of the mitigation that stakeholders have been taking is renewable energy. These two problems or like issues, they both become increasingly critical in international community and of course in Taiwan as well. So the problem here is the ruling party in Taiwan, the Democratic Progressive Party, DPP, they have developed a lot of renewable energy policies. And like as we all know, that no policies are perfect. So there are many problems with that. And I guess Julian could actually invite some other experts to talk about the problems that we're facing in Taiwan, specifically on the climate or renewable energy policies. That like the regulatory gaps and insufficient safeguard in renewable energy governance actually has become a target for the opposition parties and beyond to advance their own political agenda, which includes amplifying disinformation and conspiracy theories around the energy policies. So then it becomes a target point for the Communist Party of China, which is CCP, to destabilize Taiwanese society. They use it to sow distrust towards democratic institutions and weaken the individual's capability in having constructive public debate. So for Taiwan, although invasion threats from the CCP has never receded, and in recent years, as China's ambition in claiming climate, energy, or any type of leadership intensifies, and also like with the factor of the timeline of achieving their rejuvenation goal is getting closer, the cross-strait tensions have escalated. So I think I personally don't think the CCP specifically adopt a energy FEMI strategy. they chose this topic because it is convenient and it intersects with a lot of aspects that could destabilize the majority of the societal issues in Taiwan. So, for example, cost of living and national security. So it is easy for them to further grow distrust against the current government, the ruling party. Yeah, so I think that's why the energy FIMI becomes one of the useful weapons for the CCP.
The time frame for data collection for this report, it's 2025. And last year, as you may know, there are a lot of events happening. There is Typhoon Dennis hitting Taiwan and destroying solar facilities in the south. There's also when we finally get rid of all nuclear power plants, and then there is nuclear referendum. So I think these events also provide a very rich ground for these actors to benefit from it by attacking the government, accusing them of incompetence, and creating a more favorable environment for the CCP in general, I think.
And how efficient is it? Because, of course, we often hear about campaigns, attempts to influence the public through social media, etc. But how are we able to quantify the real impact it has? Are we overestimating or underestimating the impact that it has?
I would say the answer is both yes and no. So if we evaluate the effectiveness of these strategies and their actions on social media platforms in terms of how persuasive they are, or simply by metrics like views, likes, or shares of this post, then the answer is usually no, they are not very efficient in that sense. Of course, there are exceptions. Certain stories and messages could be shared more extensively and reach a wider audience. But more than not, these posts do not attract much attention. And I would say in most cases, people's attitudes and political views are just not that easily changed by social media posts. But I would also argue this is not what matters. If we look at their impact from a different perspective, the answer to your question might be different. So these actors, they may not be able to change people's views overnight for them to support the CCP. But these actors do contribute to a information environment where it becomes increasingly difficult for other users to tell the facts from false claims or baseless stories. And even if individual posts are not persuasive, the cumulative effect over time can be significant. So I will argue their objective is not necessarily to convince people to accept the narrative or their viewpoints or the stories they are trying to promote, but to create uncertainty about what and whom to trust. And by flooding the information space on these social media platforms with their messages and false claims, these actors actually give people a very good reason to be skeptical of all sources of information and for them to question every piece of information they can get on these platforms. And I think over time, this can lead to information fatigue, where fact-checking requires just too much time and effort, and people just don't care about facts anymore. So from this perspective, I would say these strategies do have a real impact, but not by directly persuading people or changing their views, but by gradually undermining trust among the public in the authority of the government and democracy institutes, and increasing confusion within the broader information space. So what we found in our report on TikTok and Xiaohongshu really reflects this pattern. Surely it's partly due to how the platform is designed, it's not exactly built to encourage rational discussion in the first place. But even so, I think it's very clear that under those posts spreading misinformation about energy issues, the discussions rarely engage with the scientific and factual side of things. Instead, they are mostly entirely dominated by a highly politicized narrative, attacking the government, portraying the ruling party as corrupt, accusing it of hollowing out Taiwan and putting public health at risk. So in this kind of information environment, everything gets reduced to personal stance. So people who are actually willing to have a discussion or consider different perspectives can easily feel frustrated and eventually just decide to leave the platform for good. And over time, what we are left with is a space where facts matter less and less, and people simply take sides based on their pre-existing positions and political views. I think that to me is the most worrying part and where the actual impact lies.
So, do you have some precise examples, something that you noticed, something that you observed that is very much typical of the situation?
The typical methods on social media platforms, usually, I would say this is still be used by these actors. So we continue to see the use of automated bot accounts, coordinated networks of fake accounts, spread rumors, misinformation, or attack the government's energy policy. And these accounts may push similar messages about power shortages or solar panels containing chemicals that could damage the environment. This kind of content across multiple platforms within a short period of time. And they might also share each other's posts to broaden their reach. In some cases, you can simply identify these authentic accounts by their use of simplified Chinese characters, or they use similar profile photos, or they have very similar posting patterns, or the lack of interaction with other users. So in our reports, we identified 2 accounts pushing anti-green energy narratives, and the timing of their posts indicates the coordination between them. Because within 10 to 20 seconds of one account publishing a post, the other just posted the same image with identical text. So when you check their posting histories, they overlapped almost entirely throughout 2025. So I think this kind of coordinated activity is something we can see quite often on these different platforms.
But then again, it depends on the level of savviness of other users then, because some people would actually have the reflex of looking into that, of checking who is this person. Sometimes you're there on a social media platform or even like comments on YouTube or a news website, and somebody posts something very inflammatory, and you're just like, wait a second, who's that guy? And take a look, and then you can quickly determine that this is not a genuine actor, or at least not something acting in good faith. So, what did you observe about the reaction of people? Were you able to hear testimonies or study how people react to this?
So then in the report, we also review the comment sections under this post. We thought we could find something indicate certain users might still have the ability to critically engage with this post. And actually, we did find some accounts with comments questioning the poster's intention or whether or not the information provided is accurate. But it's a very tiny fraction of all the users leaving comments. Mostly what you can see on TikTok is still very emotional, and usually there's no factual information involved, and those accounts trying to provide a different perspective and an opportunity to reflect on this information may get flooded very quick. What you are left with is just comment after comment attacking the government, and with baseless accusations and false information. So that's what we observed on TikTok, unfortunately.
I just want to add in a bit, I guess, personal opinion is that I think it also depends on the content. Like sometimes when things just happen so fast that I know like there are people like us, for example, or many like some people in society that will do like some basic fact checking to see who posted it and where are the sources from. Like I believe there are people like this, but when things just escalate too fast, that it's just really hard to expect people to do like fact checks and basic yeah, just like even basic checking. So yeah, I think, and also the other factors I think it's really important to consider is the social media platforms, that the way they are built is the attention economy. So the more people can stay on the platform, the better. So of course, the algorithms or any platform mechanism, they will try to amplify content that are more if emotionally appealing. So like usually those emotional appealing content are usually, I wouldn't say it's most of the time mis and disinformation, but like there's a high possibility they're mis and disinformation. So they will get picked up from the algorithms on the platform and they get amplified faster than any other things. So I guess like this is also other two factors that we should consider when we think about this.
Okay, that's very interesting. And actually, a question comes to mind right now. What's the role of AI in this? I know this may sound a bit like a cliche question nowadays because we always mention AI, but in this context, it seems relevant. Is it playing any role in both ways, actually? Do you think it facilitates, or to which extent does it facilitate the creation of nefarious content, but also to which extent does it create skepticism? Because we see actually people getting more and more critical of what they see online because they have the reflex to think, wait, this is AI. Sometimes it's not AI, actually. We're even pushing it too far sometimes. But what in general is the role played by AI in this?
So we certainly see the use of AI becoming an important part in the discussion of energy issues, but I think it does not necessarily involve foreign actors or influence campaigns. What we have seen is that with the expansion of large language model LLM services such as ChatGPT, there is a growing trend of people citing the responses from these services as evidence in the discussions on energy policy and climate issues. And in several cases, these responses are even used to challenge the conclusion of fact-checking organizations or reports from established media outlets or clarification from the authority. So I think it's also worrying, but in terms of pro-CCP actors using AI to promote their messages and narratives, I think it might still be under development, and surely it is going to be included into their arsenal. And other than that, there is also increasing use of short videos, memes, AI-generated visuals to make messages more engaging and easier to share across platforms. But I think this is not just certain actors, but a broader trend online in general.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how the like because I guess before generative AI becomes prevalent, that the production of mis and disinformation, like it actually takes a lot of time and like they will have to produce specific piece and then like post on different platforms. But now because of AI, that just makes everything much easier and then less time consuming. So then it's easier for those actors just to launch like campaigns on every single things with large scale. So yeah, I think since these issues or like these problems just becoming like more and more getting more and more attention, but then people are still, I guess like researchers like us, we're still navigating like what are the better ways to counter this.
And this is actually the question I want to ask now is what can we do about it? What can Taiwan do about it? How do we get to fight such a phenomenon? What do you think are the ways that we can protect ourselves against this?
Yeah, so like I say, it's this question, of course, like have been thinking about it a lot, and I guess like on daily basis, and not just like us as researchers, but I believe scholars, policymakers, or any like relevant stakeholders working on countering dis and misinformation, we have been thinking about this. And then now like plus AI issues too. So I would say that like there's no systematic approach to counter the problem at the moment for this like challenging situation we're in now. And there are a lot of different aspects. So starting from the social media platforms where most mis and disinformation happen, like I just mentioned earlier, that for a long time that the government has been requesting and relying on these big tech platforms regulating themselves. But we know that these companies, that their priorities are always for profit and not so much for social impact or putting efforts on enhancing social cohesion. Although, like I believe they will claim from on their PR statement that they have done whatever they can do. But if you look into it, it's just simply one of their strategies to promote their company reputations. And they might argue that they have been putting some efforts into investing in fundings in fact-checking or flagging suspicious content, but the efforts has never been enough compared to how much they have been profiting from users. And not to mention that in recent years, the fundings have been decreasingly sharply. So back to the question, I guess what not just me, but also other researchers would suggest is like how we prevail against this problem is the government needs to realize and understand that relying on big tech platforms to self-regulate themselves shouldn't be the solution to the problem we're facing now. And like although for the Taiwanese case that there might be differences in terms of cultural context and the political reality, but I think the EU Digital Services Act DSA provides a good example of what the Taiwanese government could use as a reference to examine what could be done here in Taiwan. And the other points that I have been emphasizing a lot when we're doing our work is the media literacy piece. It's really important. And I'm pretty sure other researchers will agree with me too. So the information resilience is not just about content moderation, because it is impossible to control what sort of information people are getting from their everyday life. Doesn't matter if it's offline and online. And then, like, I think this circles back to what we were talking about. Like, now, because of the AI, it makes it even harder to beat the speed of those misinformation, disinformation produced by AI. So I think having the capability and capacity to differentiate what suspicious information is, knowing how to find out reliable sources, and don't accidentally become part of the mis and disinformation ecosystem by helping amplify false information. These are all very important steps. And then I think people also have realized that debunking, like I think this is what we have been talking a lot in the past few years in Taiwan, that debunking is important. And yes, I think it is important, but I think people have started to realize that it might not be the only or like the ideal solution. It is because debunking takes like a long time, just like Ming-tse just mentioned. And then it's like playing a whack-a-mole game where it's just simply impossible to debunk every piece of mis or disinformation. So again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't or we don't need to invest in debunking anymore, but I think it should be considered as just part of the broader media literacy strategy we're having now. So not just debunking. I think pre-bunking should also be the focus for any sort of media literacy strategy that we're talking about. So pre-bunking is when you proactively warn the public about misinformation and disinformation tactics and strategy before the public encounters them, so that it could help them build cognitive immunity. It's like a vaccine in which you expose individuals with mis and disinformation first to assist and equip them with the capability of spotting, questioning, or like resisting any potential false information they might encounter is important. And then I think the last point I want to make here is the government needs to understand, or like just any stakeholders working on these issues, we need to understand that this is not just anyone's single responsibility. Like it should be a whole society effort where perhaps the government should invest more on, I don't know, NGOs or any sectors who are doing media literacy work and get more support, get them more support. So yeah, like it should be everyone's responsibility to counter the threats from any type of mis and disinformation that we're facing nowadays.
No, really, I think it's pretty much it. Eventually, well, also unfortunately, for now, it all boils down to media literacy and AI literacy, and individuals' ability to critically review every single piece of information they get from no matter where, whether it's from a media outlet, newspaper, magazine, or it's from a social media post. Doesn't matter. You might need to start try to build your ability to make a decision about whether or not this is accurate. You have to develop your ability to tell the factual from misinformation. And that is, I think, for now, what we can do.
Well, indeed, it's not exactly new, isn't it? After all, even in the past, when we just had traditional media, there were also media that were not doing a good job or that would act maliciously. So it's not entirely new, isn't it?
I would say no, it's not new. It's just it's the same content, but sorry, not same content, like same problem, but new methods and approach to further make this problem even worse.
Yes, that sounds about right. Well, Elena, Ming-tse, thank you so much for your work. Thank you so much for your insights. Where can we find the report? If you can just tell our listeners where they can find the report if they want to read it.
So research and action, we are not operating in a very public format. However, I like we are happy to share the report if the anyone who's interested just reach out to us. I think it's really easy. We don't have our own website at the moment, but if you go on LinkedIn, you can send us messages on LinkedIn, and then we will definitely get back to you.
All right, Elena and Ming-tse, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
The war in Iran has opened the door to countless analyses of its impact on Taiwan and East Asia. As the situation evolves day by day and the long-term consequences remain difficult to determine, let's ask a few questions about how it is affecting the region.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ben Sando. I'm a research fellow at the Global Taiwan Institute.
Ben tells us what we can already observe in terms of impact on the region, in particular on South Korea and Japan.
I think all of this Northeast Asian and East Asian countries are in a difficult position. As you know, 60% of Middle Eastern oil went to Asia. Actually, Asia, and particularly East Asia, if you're talking about South Korea, Japan, were far more reliant on Middle Eastern oil than Europe In fact, Europe only imported 4% of the oil that goes through the Strait of Hormuz. So I would say that every country in East Asia has been very heavily affected. But in the case of South Korea, yes, it probably has also coincided with the strategy of the current president, Lee Jae-myung, who was elected last year, to take a non-interventionist strategy in global affairs, particularly in conflicts that the United States is involved in. That's not to say that South Korea is not a good ally of the United States, but far less than the previous president of South Korea, Yoon Suk-yeol. Lee Jae-myung is less interested in freely supporting U.S. objectives beyond the Korean Peninsula, which has made it take a more muted tone and try to essentially stay out of the discussion globally by global leaders around the Iran war.
Professor Ingyu Oh of Kansai Gaida University in Japan also compares the situations in Japan and South Korea.
There is an overall atmosphere, overall, tension in South Korea, rather, over the issue of whether they have to help Trump, because Trump has repeatedly asked South Korea and Japan to help. And Japan, Takaichi, when she paid a visit to Trump, she hugged Trump and gave her like a, sort of half and half kind of message saying she's going to help when the war is over. So she will dispatch the, mine-sweeping task forces to the Strait Hormuz if the war is over to clean up the mines. There was like a 50% of, goodwill suggestion to Trump, but South Korea, they offered nothing for that kind of war effort here, unless other than selling Korean Tangung, Changong anti-missile system to United Arab Emirates. So I think what Lee is calculating is completely different from what Takaichi is calculating in this situation. And Takaichi is taking sort of balanced approach so that in the future she can, protect herself from both ends. From Iran, as you know, Iran and Japan are really close allies for many, many decades, and they in fact have, illegally imported Iranian crude oil in the 1990s, and so they have that kind of background history in Iran in terms of Iran and Japan relations. Japan-Iran relations goes back a long time during the Shah era, not only Shah era, but also in the recent, after the revolution, Islam revolution too. They have maintained close ties mainly because of exchanges of technology, finance, and crude oil. So, Hidemitsu is the company in Japan that has illegally imported sometimes Iranian crude oil to Japan because there was much needed natural resources for Japan. So despite the embargo of Iranian oil and the patrol, and the Hormuz Strait was patrolled by British naval forces back then, but this company boldly sent vessels out there, and they successfully moved Iranian crude oil back to Japan, and that's has been a really widely sensationalized story in Japan and elsewhere. So in other words, what I'm saying is that Iran has a very high respect about Japan, and vice versa. Japan respects Iran. Their relationship is really nice. So in a sense, it's very difficult for Japan to betray that by siding outspokenly with Trump. So this is one way of interpreting Takaichi's strategy, that she's not 100% supporting Trump's suggestions of sending minesweeping fleet to Hormuz, but rather give him like a 50-50. If the war is over, they will send it out.
The two main points to watch are the consequences for energy procurement and the impact on both countries' positions towards the United States.
South Korea does not have many ties with Iran. South Korea's dependence is particularly on the UAE, Qatar, for its oil imports. So for South Korea, the destruction of Iran is not the most important element, of course. That's, of course, very different to China, right? China imported nearly all of Iran's oil, and of course counts Iran as a comprehensive strategic partner. Of course, North Korea cooperates with Iran on certain technologies, but no, South Korea does not really concern itself with the fate of Iran. In fact, South Korea's concerns have been more about its own economic security and its trade with the countries which are inside of the Persian Gulf, like the UAE and Qatar.
So what affects them is not the fate of Iran, it's the fate of the Strait.
Absolutely. There was discussion, for example, of the helium imports that South Korea is dependent on. South Korea has a semiconductor industry that, of course, is one of its most promising industries, and helium is an essential input for essentially the semiconductor manufacturing process. And South Korea would rely, I believe, on Qatar for its helium, and that's very difficult to replace. So before the ceasefire was called, South Korea was scrambling to find alternatives. But should the war have dragged on, if it restarts, South Korea will find itself eventually short on this essential input. Now, that's not quite the same for Japan, because Japan's semiconductor industry is not as large or developed. But in terms of the crude oil, particularly crude oil dependence, both countries have found themselves extremely reliant on safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz.
An irony is that if you go to Seoul, there is a big street in downtown Gangnam called Tehran Street or Tehran Boulevard. Likewise, if you go to Tehran, Iran, there is a big boulevard named Seoul Boulevard. So that was back in the 1970s when President Park Chung-hee, the dictator, established a great relationship with the Shah for the oil, and then Korea provided construction projects. So Korea at the time had a really nice, big construction companies working in the Middle East, and they gave a lot of Iranian, gave a lot of effort to complete Iranian Shah's Iranian, construction projects. In return, they secured Iranian crude oil, but in 1978, that relationship has ended completely. Korea had no relationship whatsoever with Iran in terms of close relationship. What I'm saying, like the Japanese and Iranian relationship, they don't have that in Korea. So here, what do you have to lose? You lose nothing for Jamming Lee, but Jamming Lee is taking a very cautious approach by saying that we're not going to send any minesweeping, fleet to the Strait of Hormuz. We're not going to send any military assistance for American effort there. So he just rejects everything. So people wonder what he's trying to gain here. Gain is that he's not going to anger Iran, probably not. But then Korea has a lot of problems with. They have to rely on the United States for several things, especially when Trump is around. That is nuclear projects. Korea wants a nuclear submarine on the one hand. Korea wants plutonium reprocessing facilities in Korea. These two are very critical, important projects that Trump, in passing has agreed to allow Korea to do that. But if you betray the United States, betray Trump, they genuinely cannot get any of these two projects done. It is a really big puzzle now in Korea, and probably also among the Japanese politicians, what's the real purpose or real intention of Korea here by refusing to provide any help to the Trump's war effort in Iran, right? So we have, so kind of intrigued, because in the end, the worst kind of scenario would be Korea would anger America and also anger Iran, but in return they get nothing. So Jamming Lee loses legitimacy here in terms of his foreign policy status in Korea, not only in Korea but also in the international community. The Iranian this war case is an ultimate, test for the Lee administration in South Korea, because people are just, really trying to figure out what this guy is really up to and what his real face is, right, in terms of international relations.
Not to, consider the gloomy roots, but I do think when we're talking about South Korea, I don't know if this Iran war will help its cooperation with the United States. South Korea has, under this new president, has been more reluctant to engage in regional security objectives. Like under Yoon Suk-yeol, the previous South Korean president was more free and willing to engage with the United States on maritime security, sail with exercises, air exercises around East Asia. South Korea's President Lee fears, and many progressives or left-wing South Koreans fear, entrapment into a foreign policy endeavor or action or objective that is not relevant to what they believe their national security to be. They have worried that the US could bring them into conflict with China against their wishes. Now, you could argue that that's in their national interests because China is not a friendly power. That being said, after the Iran war, South Korea will be probably more inclined to worry that greater cooperation with the United States, for example, on Taiwanese regional security, could lead it into an unwanted conflict with China if the US proves itself aggressive in a certain way. So I also worry that this has made it a lot harder for alliance planners in South Korea and the United States, I should say, alliance planners who work with South Korea to try to get South Korea to be involved in more of the Taiwan or Taiwan Strait and regional security.
Ben Sando also warns against conflating the situation in Iran with what could happen with China.
This is a very, very bad outcome for Taiwan. I say this as somebody who focuses on the United States and the United States policies towards Taiwan. There were some in Taiwan that was celebratory that the United States was willing to use its power overseas. They were celebratory when Donald Trump he extracted Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela, and then they were happy when he attacked the regime because they felt like this was a president who was willing to intervene overseas. And to the Taiwanese, their hope is that the United States will be willing to intervene should China invade. However, this may not be the same now. The dynamics may not be the same now, unfortunately. Why? Because this war has proven very unpopular. US support amongst the general public for interventions overseas was already weak. You could argue it was recovering under this model that Donald Trump was trying to create, which was a model of very narrow interventions. We essentially defeat the Venezuelan threat by simply extracting, one person and his wife, right? There was an initial hope that we can defeat the Iranian threat by simply killing the leadership. That did not prove the case for Iran. And now the American people are reckoning with another failed intervention. Why is this a failed intervention? Well, because we did not achieve many of the most important objectives, the three most important objectives. The first two were outlined in the very beginning. Donald Trump did call for the Iranian people to overthrow their regime. So regime change was an objective. The second one was the defeat of the nuclear threat. This was also something that Trump and Hegseth called for in the very beginning. This has neither been achieved because the enriched uranium possessed by Iran remains in the country. And the final objective emerged during the war, which was when Iran closed the strait. The US had an objective to prove it could reopen the strait by force without having to negotiate with Iran, and has not been able to do this. So in these three important, crucial areas, American objectives failed. This does not bode well for A, the American reaction to the war and American interventions in general, and B, potentially the perception of American power around the world. At the same time, the US has blown through a lot of the critical munitions from air defense, Tomahawk missiles, Patriot batteries, THAAD missiles that would be essential for a defense of Taiwan too. So there will be a time, a very expensive time, the US will have to rebuild its stock. So I cannot consider this to be a foreign policy outcome that should be seen as, that could be really beneficial to Taiwan ultimately.
We will meet again next week for a new episode of Taiwan versus the World.